It's Laura Eubanks of Design for Serenity reporting from Carlsbad, California with your succulent tip of the day. And I haven't touched this little presentation of succulents since I installed them a couple of years ago. And I mean, take a look at this. Surely you can see what a hot mess it is. Look at this long trunk. I see dirt. You know how I feel about that. The client said it best. When we were doing a walkthrough of the garden before I started maintenance, she pointed at this and she said, "It doesn't look intentional." And I thought that summed it up perfectly. It has merits, of course, they're succulents, of course they're gorgeous, but it no longer looks intentional. So if you have areas in your garden that you could say that about, I'm going to show you how to handle it. Now you can see that I've pulled a lot of the plant material out, but I've left some of it intact. This I like. This part of the arrangement looks pretty, doesn't it? It's not leggy. It looks beautiful. So you don't have to necessarily pull everything out. Use your eye, use your own discretion. Now what about the stuff that I did pull out? Now all of you collectors are gonna lose your minds and probably send me death threats when you see what I'm gonna do with this crest. Look at this Graptopetalum paraguayense crest. Now when I planted this in this spot 2.5 years ago or whenever I did it, it was not crested. It is now crested. Collectors love these. Here in California, in Carlsbad, this is very common. Plants do this here all the time. Remember, I'm not a collector, I'm a designer, and this is a designer's garden. So we have common plants that we've used in uncommon ways. We pull them out of the ground, we cut them up, we put them back. We're pretty cavalier about it. So don't be mad at me and don't say anything nasty, but I am going to cut the stem of this crest. So you collectors might want to avert your gaze here. Now, what I did effectively is I made it shorter. I don't want it sticking up in the air. I want this to lay flush on the ground, like so. See, it's almost like a wreath, isn't it? How that just is tucked right around the base of the ground. Now what's gonna happen is where I cut, just like any other succulent, roots will form. It will take off again in time, but I wanted to change the presentation of that plant. Now this one didn't crest, but look at all of the babies on the stem. Isn't that cute? I like to save the little guys for uses when I'm making succulent or botanical jewelry or I'm making real small, cute little arrangements. So I do covet the little tiny baby guys and I do keep those for other uses. But I don't want this big Christmas tree. So again, I'm gonna cut the stem and I'm going to set this back on the ground. Many of you asked, don't you need to harden off the stem first? Don't you need to let it callus? Here in San Diego, Carlsbad specifically in April, no, I don't. This is not going to rot. This soil it's just damp, it's not wet, it's not going to be a problem. If you live in areas where you're concerned about precipitation, irrigation, wet or boggy soil, then you can take your cuttings and put them in the garage for a few days until you see a callus over the wounds. Here in San Diego, we don't really need to do that. Remember what I always say too, I don't like to see dirt. So I want to make sure that as we're looking down on this arrangement, that we don't see any gaps. So I'm going to take one of these wonderful Graptopetalum California sunsets. Look at that color. Isn't that beautifully stressed? And I left a little more stem on this one because I want it to stick up a little. Now, I didn't dig a hole. If the stem meets the soil or the soil is somewhere in the vicinity, you're fine. If your succulent stands up, you've done your job. We don't necessarily need to plant it. It's going to harden off and root into that soil. It will figure it out without me having to dig a hole. Tuck another one in right here where I see a gap. More gap. See, this isn't even close to the soil. Doesn't matter. What'll happen, this plant will stress more, it'll turn more of a kind of a mauve color, and it'll throw off air roots and get the moisture and precipitation that it needs without ever having to make contact with the soil. Now, this is a cute little circle, but I'm not really about circles. I want this arrangement to work its way out a little bit. And this is where the artist or the designer in you comes forth. You have to use your eye. If it looks good, it is good. Now, the best time to work so cavalierly with succulents is in the cooler months, in the winter, the late fall, the early spring. The very, very hottest parts of summer, probably not the best time to work with these plants as cuttings because they may very well burn. So now's the time to get out in your gardens and start in and pull out those succulents, cut them up. Don't be shy, be brave. You can do it, tear in, mess around with your arrangements until you can step back and say, I'm proud of that. That looks really good. And then you've made art. This has been Laura Eubanks reporting from Carlsbad, California with your succulent tip of the day.